In the Idaho 4 case, I just always have a hard time believing that only one person, suspect one, committed the crime that is described in the probable cause affidavit. I don't know, Lainey, about you. I have a hard time believing that.
A lot of people in our comment sections have brought up that it's not really possible for someone to do what they did in the time span that we were given. That being said, we have a forensic expert to help us out. Brian Kohberger is a name that's familiar to almost everyone in the true crime space at this point. But was it really one person? I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers, and a great YouTube channel producer by the name of Forensic Frenzy is here today with 18 reasons why she doesn't think it was one person. Hi, Forensic. How are you?
Great. How are you guys?
Well, I'm a little bit intimidated because I don't know if you've watched our channel as we've watched yours. We often will do a thing like 5 red flags or 3 yellow flags or 5 reasons. You came up with 18 reasons why you don't think the crime could have been committed by one person?
Yes. Yes. And I told myself I could have given them to you in small batches. But if I had done that, I feel like that's kind of how we heard things. And things get lost, and then you don't realize how many indicators there are. So I compiled them as one, and we have 18.
We love it.
Okay, without any further ado, let's see if we can get through some of them. The first one here, 2 men at a local business. I think I know what that's all about, but why don't you tell us?
We heard originally from the police that we had 2 men at a local business. They said there was no evidence that they had anything to do with the crimes, but I believe that that may have been at that time.
I'm not remembering. What business is this? Help me out.
So they did not tell us what business that was, but they did just say it was a local business. There was a report that it was approximately 3 weeks prior to the attacks, and that Kaylee had been out shopping. She noticed a man that appeared to be following her around the store, and he appeared to follow her as she exited to go toward her car. She looked back, and he was gone.
So, okay. That's what I thought. When you said 2 men. When you said 2 men at a local business, I was thinking you meant there was a business with 2 men in it. No, this is the incident in which Kaylee thought that there were possibly 2 guys following her, and then the police did kind of check it out, and they said it was nothing. The 2 guys just said that they were trying to meet women, something like that.
Gross.
Okay, got it. Number 2, occupants, but also individuals.
So at the time that we got our bolo, we were told occupant or occupants. And they also said the individual in the individuals, multiple, in the vehicle may have, and then they eventually said that they knew that they had information. So it was occupant, occupants, but it was also very sternly individuals. Optional as to whether or not it was an occupant or an occupants. But when they said individuals, they usually said it was individuals in the car that possibly had information. So I thought that that was a little odd. Then upon arrest of the current defendant, it quickly became a question at the press conference. So do you have all the people? Are we safe? And to that, Chief Fry responded, we have an individual. So once again, our occupant or occupants is now a single individual.
Well, when Fry said we have an individual, was it Thompson or one of the other people? I clearly remember at the press conference said we're still looking or something like that. We're still the investigation is still open. I think that's what they said. The
yes, they did.
Yes.
Yep. And please send us any information that you have about the defendant. And I think that it was more or less they were looking for other information in regards to putting him together with another individual and making sure that they had people who could support the idea that these 2 individuals even knew one another.
Isn't that interesting that when they said that they have an individual, when they first pointed the finger at Mr. Kohberger. It was at that point said that they were still conducting an investigation. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that at that same press conference, they said, if you have tips, call them in. So that.
And what a weird way to put, we got the guy. Like, why not high five yourselves and say, yeah, we absolutely got the guy. You guys can go back to your normal life. Just be vigilant so that nothing like this ever happens again. We have an individual is just like, okay.
Your next one really has always kind of bothered me because there's a guy at the FBI and that's his only job. Just like the guy at McDonald's, it's his only job to make the fries. The guy at the FBI is an expert and probably gets paid well in excess of six figures to be an expert on cars. And he said the car was a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. Oops.
That was another thing that was weird at the press conference when he was arrested. They also did say, we've located an Elantra. It is a 2015 Elantra. So it was also an Elantra.
Right.
I just don't know what that means. I don't know if that means that they knew right away. This one's not going to have anything inside of it. It's not what we were looking for. I don't know what that meant. But I just think that it's a little strange to not find the car that you've had, not just the public looking for, but you asked other agencies to seek it out as well. So I'm not even sure how you actually came across this Elantra then.
And again, like I said before, the guy, that is his only job, to be an expert in a car. Now, I don't know the difference between car A and car B, but if you're getting paid a great deal of money to be an expert on cars, I think that you should be a little bit more accurate. Now, in the next one, number 5, I'm sorry, I kind of stole your thunder on this one, didn't I?
Yeah, no, that's okay. So we are still looking for all the evidence. That's what they said. So they were asked if they were still looking for the knife. And the answer was, we are still looking for all evidence, but we are also still looking for the murder weapon. All evidence, I do assume, is digital evidence, the trail that proves that someone bought the murder weapon and stuff like that. But I thought it was weird to use the word all if you have the car.
Which brings us right into the next one. And I thought this was interesting too, because before I was an attorney, I was a reporter. And so I've read a lot of police reports. I've read a lot of investigative documents, some of which I wasn't supposed to be reading. But, sometimes people will take you into their confidence and show you stuff. So instead of saying the suspect's vehicle, they said suspect vehicle number 1. And you flagged that.
Yes. So suspect vehicle number 1 has always really bothered me. It bothers me even more now that last November, Jeremy Best shot and killed his pregnant wife in Driggs, Idaho. So a little bit about that. There is a probable cause declaration available on the iCourt website. You can go and take a look. It's the very first document. And in that probable cause declaration, you get extreme detail of what happened. Things that were said before the 911 dispatcher ever even said 911, what is your emergency? And you also know what the officer was encountering as he entered the neighborhood to find the female deceased. The officer passed a single black SUV. He caught a partial plate, IT 39, and it ended up belonging to his victim. It had been stolen after her husband shot her in the driveway. And at that point, I took from there and I told myself, okay, so there really might be something strange about suspect vehicle 1, because in this case, there only is one suspect vehicle, and Jeremy Best wasn't said to be driving suspect vehicle 1. He's just said to be driving Mrs. Best's black SUV in the license plate. So I think suspect vehicle 1 has always bothered me, and it bothers me more now that I'm seeing other information and other probable cause from the actual state of Idaho, where this is not actually like a typical term.
No, I
disturbing,
agree with you.
but yeah,
if they're following a car for a person of interest, it would be the suspect vehicle or the subject vehicle. Why did they put number 1? Where's number 2? Where's number 3? Where's number 4? I agree with you 100%.
Or
a
did
little
the
bit.
suspect have multiple vehicles and you're just saying that vehicle number one is the one that was used during the commission of these crimes? Like, but for some reason, there is something different about inputting number one. Yeah.
Now, I have a guess on the next one. I have a guess, but I'm not 100% sure when you say the movement of the car while DM hears noise on the third floor. Of course, we know she heard the dog and she heard what she thought was playing with the dog. What's this all about?
So at 4 a.m. or about 4 a.m., Dylan is hearing something on the third floor, which law
Right.
enforcement, in their probable cause, they leave you to believe that it's the girls on the third floor being attacked. I'll tell you why. Well, because they literally say that after Dylan saw this person coming toward her, they walked past her and out the slider. And
Right.
everyone assumed, right, that they're coming from the second floor, from the direction
Right.
of Ethan and Xana's room, which
Right.
means that they're not upstairs afterward attacking the girls. So at 4 a.m., when this noise was going on upstairs, Brian was still in his car, if that's even Brian. So how did that happen? How is he in two places at once? And then
There.
additionally, you
Yeah.
have the fact that his car stayed in movement. It didn't even enter the neighborhood again until 4:04. And then it was
Right.
parked at what time?
406. No, after 406, because wasn't 406 the time that it made the 3-point turn?
I believe so. Yeah.
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 So you're right. That makes no sense at all.
Yeah. So
We
there
one
was
of our
someone
five.
in that house, it seems like, for quite a few minutes while Brian was allegedly still in his car circling the house.
Well, I've said it before, that whole timeline, and an extensive thing on the timeline at one point and drew it out on the screen. The whole thing is going to go down because it makes no sense. How could one person have gone into the house after parking the car at 406, and then the car is seen speeding away at 420, and that doesn't even take into account the amount of time it would take to actually park the car, get out of that car, get into the house, and then the time it would take after the crime is committed to get back to the car. So that's never made any sense to any, not me. That has never made any sense to any objective human being who has two brain cells to rattle around.
I was gonna say that I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but for me, if I need to, like, for example, if I'm driving 20 minutes to the office, I know that I need to be done 5 minutes before that because it's gonna take me 5 minutes just to get to my car in the first place and get all my stuff together. It's a crazy small time frame to be doing any of this.
So now I understand that one. Go ahead. Go
And
ahead.
then to think that, I mean, to make your time frame like even smaller, um, the dog starts barking and the noise from next door is at 4:17, which
Hmm.
some
Hmm.
of that noise they kind of almost insinuate is what Dylan's hearing in the house. It's okay, I'm going to help you, the crying and stuff. They
Hmm.
kind of make those things one and the same. And it's just kind of strange that at 4:17, they literally said that's starting at 4:17, and 3 minutes later the car is flying out of there, and it's like, how quickly did whatever happened on the second floor actually happen? How fast are you alleging this? It's
Now,
incredible.
if I'm a juror, I'm saying no. There's no way. That's just totally unbelievable. There's got to be a lot more to it. And I know there's another YouTuber out there who will remain unnamed, but he says, "Oh no, this is it. That's all the evidence there is." And they don't. There's a lot more to this. There's a lot more to this. They just haven't disclosed it yet. And I'm not going to throw a spanner in the works by saying what it is that's out there because I don't know. But there's a lot more out there. Dylan Mortensen's statement versus Bethany Funk's statement. Well, wait a minute. Hold on. Forensic. We know what Dylan Mortensen said, but we really know little at all about what Bethany Funk said, other than that she saw Xana and Ethan at the frat house that night, and then they came home. So, what's this one all about?
That is true. But what I think here is that Dylan's statement seems favorable to the prosecution, while Bethany's seems more favorable, or so they thought, to the defense, right?
Yeah,
So they have
yeah,
two different encounters of what may have happened that night, two different experiences. But these young ladies still are friends, it would appear. And they, according to the media, went and got tattoos together with the tattoo that Maddie Mogan had on their arm. And if
Yep.
that's true, then I think that those two things come together and tell me that what Dylan reported to Bethany and what Bethany reported to Dylan, they have decided amongst themselves that it's not going to stray this case. It's not going to stop justice from happening. That more or
Right.
less what you know and what I know is going to make justice happen. So that's just
It-
my opinion on that, and that is entirely speculation. But I
no, that's
believe that if
interesting.
these girls had entirely different stories, and say perhaps I was Dylan Mortensen and Bethany's story didn't mesh with mine, and it was something that would potentially put the case at risk, I think that I would probably maybe be at odds with her right now. So I'm not really sure I could if I knew that what I saw was authentic, and then here you come with this other story that goes completely against everything that I've said so far, I'm not really sure how I could go out and get a matching tattoo with you. So
Well, maybe that
I'm really strongly believing that they are together on this and they know already.
maybe that's one of the reasons that Bethany fought to not come back for the preliminary hearing, and maybe that's one of the reasons why she really doesn't want to come back and participate. I don't know.
I
Again, I'm
think so.
speculating.
Hmm.
I do
I,
also want to say too, I mean, I don't know what their mindset is at the time, obviously, but I'm someone who can have a tendency to be absent-minded. And if I'm Bethany, if Dylan's saying one thing, I'm not sure what I saw, I would be more swayed to believe, like to question what even I saw if someone that I consider a friend is saying one thing, it's just like at night you're not really thinking too much of anything what's happening, and then all of a sudden it becomes a key pivotal moment in this whole case. You're going to start questioning yourself if what you think you saw doesn't really align with what you consider to be facts.
Right. And then I just wanted to say, because this one's not on there, um, Idaho State Police Chief Aaron Snell did actually say that Dylan and Bethany, they could be witnesses, they could be survivors, they could potentially be the keys to this whole thing.
Mhm.
And I think it was because of what Bethany knew. He knew that Bethany's saying, well, they stayed at Sigma Chi all night and they came home at 1:45 a.m.
Mhm.
That's not going to crack this case. Not at all. But
No,
whatever she saw that Anne thought was exculpatory, he knew is going to play a huge part in this case. So,
right, right. So now we already talked about number 10. We already talked about this, that initially the affidavit says that law enforcement believes that the crimes happened between 4 and 4:25. And now we just talked about this. I think the affidavit says that the car was making this 3-point turn at 4:06. But why do you have the question mark there? Because we just don't know, like we said before. We don't know when he got
so
into the house.
Yeah, and the probable cause affidavit actually says that he came into the neighborhood at 4:04, and yet on the Linda Lane footage
Right,
that I keep seeing, it does look like at 4:05, 4:06, the vehicle is actually doing that 3-point turn.
right,
So even if you wanted to say 4:04 to 4:20, that's not what we have as our timeline. 4:06 to 4:20, it doesn't really matter what time you make it. Our timeline is 4 to 4:25, which is at minimum 5 minutes after we see or before we see the car even on camera again. It's actually when DoorDash is there, not when Brian's in the area. And then 4:25 is actually 5 minutes after Brian left the area, if it was Brian. So it's like there it almost seems like that plays into someone entered and then someone else may have entered.
and I've had commenters say to me, "Well, what difference does it make? A minute when you go out to get your mail or whatever? What difference does it make if it's 4:04 or 4:06? Well, I'm not writing an affidavit on which somebody's being arrested and potentially hitting a firing squad, and I'm not going to go on the stand having written an affidavit as an attorney, and any attorney in the audience or elsewhere knows." That if Brett Payne goes on the stand and someone says that this timeline is not accurate, he's going to have to backpedal. And what that means is he doesn't have any credibility. Well, if you weren't telling the truth about that, are you telling the truth about this? So this is a serious issue with respect to the credibility of whatever police officers are going to go on the stand and testify to this. So this is big. I think you've really hit on something on the first 10. So, number 11, I'm going to guess. You and I haven't talked about this beforehand, have we?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to guess that number 11 has to do with one of the discovery requests. Am I right?
Yes. So the
Okay.
first and the second.
Okay. Yeah.
So what we have there is she did ask for, obviously, she asked for Brian's statements,
Right.
her defendant, but she also requested statements of a co-defendant, and it wasn't exactly verbatim, like the two things were not the same. She asked for statements of a co-defendant in response to any interrogation. So I thought that that was really specific to ask of a co-defendant that may not even exist. If you didn't know the co-defendant existed, then wouldn't you just ask for any statements by the co-defendant at all, regardless of if they were in response to an interrogation or not? So I feel like she knew exactly what she was looking for with that and tried to be as specific as possible.
Well, I agree with what you're saying here, but I'll play devil's advocate on this one, number 10, only because for two reasons. One, you send out standard discovery, and this is one of the standard questions I think that a defense attorney would send out. And two, I went over the Idaho criminal rules with respect to discovery, and this is one of the things that's in the rules as a standard thing that you're allowed to get and ask for. So I'm only going to play devil's advocate on this one, that's kind of a standard thing, both by the rules and what
I
attorneys do.
agree. I think it's
Yeah.
I think it strays a little when you ask for it in response to an interrogation specifically, and not just anything that they may have said at all. Like, so you're looking for statements from your defendant, and you're saying whether it be before or after an arrest. But when you look for the co-defendant, you say in response to an interrogation. So, yeah, maybe they haven't arrested the guy, but what about before? Before
I hear
arrest
you.
or as a
Yep.
response to an interrogation? You know what I mean? It's almost like it's
Yeah.
not exactly the same on purpose. That's why I added that here.
Well, that's something that you would have to. Okay, so now the next one, number 11. Now I'm intrigued. Various documents with the name of the entity and person redacted. Is that because they, in their discovery and in their subpoenas, they've looked for not only Reddit but AT&T and all the others? Is that what you're talking about here?
Yeah,
No.
so we are talking sort of about that. What we're actually talking about, though, is some documentation that I found from November 16th, December 5th, January 10th, January 25th. And these documents do not have a like a name as to what entity was served,
Really?
the person that it pertained to, or the account that it may have pertained to. Any of that sort of information. And I also have one for Walmart, and it doesn't have a name on it. Ironically, on December 14th, it was submitted, and then we had an issue over at WSU. So I
Okay,
have a
I'm
number
not.
of blank documents that don't relate to Mr. Kohberger specifically by name. And then I have all these documents that do say Mr. Kohberger's name. When it
Okay,
comes to
maybe
the
I'm having a
victims, they
maybe I'm
redact
having
them.
a maybe I'm having a problem with my own thinking here. But you said that it didn't have a name, but it did have a name. The Walmart one, isn't that the famous one about the Dickies? How can you say the documents
No,
don't have a name, but they do have a name? I don't get it.
no. That's not what I. No. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm
I'm
saying is
sorry.
that they actually don't. There's no entity like as to who was served on there. So if it says like uh, a name on there, it's
Yeah.
redacted. If it says like any like, but most of the documents that say that are for Brian, they do just say Brian. So for example, the Reddit,
Okay.
it just says Brian Kohberger's account. Whereas these are documents that literally don't say anything. They don't say anything. Brian, Kaylee, Xana, Dylan, Bethany, Maddie, no one. Just Ethan, no one. Just no one. They say no one.
Interesting. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
Not at all. And then some of the dates on them. December 5th, the same day that we found out about the two gentlemen at the store. November
Yeah.
16th. That was really, really early on. Like, that was super early on, and they're
I think
hiding an entire document.
all right, you took the words out of my mouth. I think I was going to say that there's this proves that there's a lot more going on in this case than any of us really know. I mean, I've heard a lot of speculation about this, but none of us really know what's going on. So now, various file and document sharing warrants served. Is that what you're just talking about also?
Yes, so things like,
Okay.
Google Drive, Microsoft,
Yeah.
OneDrive, stuff like, iCloud. There's just a lot of like sharing stuff in there.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, I think most of us know, like, if you have it in one place, you can like email it to another, like you can sign in and just, like if it's on your phone, you can sign in on the browser on the computer and just download it from there. If you have those kinds of things, that's kind of how cloud storage is supposed to work. You're supposed to be able to get on multiple devices and download your stuff. So is it just that there were things in the sharing apps and stuff like that? Um, or is it that things were being shared with someone through those
Right.
things? So that's why
Right.
that's here.
Okay. Number 14. I think we've covered this, although I guess it was in our previous episode, the exculpatory evidence, the material evidence that obviously pertains to Ms. Funk. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
So if Bethany had exculpatory evidence, that would actually indicate a possible accomplice, or it could just mean that they have the wrong guy. So that deserves to at least be on the list and considered, just in case it's not that they have the wrong guy, and it is that they have more than one person involved, and what she did experience was just the other perpetrator.
Yeah. And then there's Brady Giglio. We talked about this a little bit on our previous episode. I mean, that this is a mystery. We don't know who is involved, but it's an interesting mystery in this case that Brady Giglio notice was sent out.
Yes, and especially like you said previously, because there are, I mean, Brady covers witnesses. And
Right.
until we heard from the private investigator that they knew Bethany had exculpatory
Right.
evidence, I mean, we didn't know anything about
Right.
Bethany, you know? So is it that? Is it that they were hiding Bethany, the Reddit, altogether? And that's what the defense thought was exculpatory info. And maybe that's what the Brady is pertaining to, is that everything that you had pertaining to a potential accomplice or a different person, you were not giving me right away. And then that would explain it. I don't know if that makes any sense to you
It
guys.
makes a lot of sense to me. Then the big one is 16. The Reddit survey called for respondents, and did Mr. Kohberger find somebody? Did he find somebody through that Reddit survey? I mean,
And then where the Reddit survey was posted, it's like such a
Yeah.
high likelihood that he may have, because it was actually posted in a Reddit forum for allegedly for ex-cons. That would make sense in his studies. And that would, I guess, make sense if he was doing what the police are insinuating that he was doing. But because he was looking for ex-cons, the respondents more than likely would have been ex-cons. And people who may have committed crimes that they didn't get caught for and stuff like that. But it was actually specifically allegedly posted for ex-cons, which would probably get you some pretty decent accomplices.
Just unthinkable, really. How do we get all the way up to 17 already? Reddit
I
warrant
know.
extraction delayed and set upon. Yep, that's
So the actual warrant for Reddit, you can still see that there. It's not where, like I said, it's just not where it's supposed to be.
okay.
So it's in May, although it should have been in April. Everything that went along with that, though, as far as the affidavit for or from Mr. Batanti, the back and forth between Bethany's attorney and the state of Idaho, whether or not and Ann Taylor, whether or not she has to come in and stuff. All that used to be in the iCourt portal, and it is gone now. So I don't know if it's
Yeah.
just all been redacted and sealed, but like I said, once upon a time when they removed it, I think a lot of us did just assume this had to have fallen apart, and that's why they're taking it out. But I do think that those things are still somewhere. I don't,
Big red
they're not there anymore.
flag, yeah.
The only thing you can find now is the survey or the warrant that says that they did a
Yeah.
a Reddit warrant, like there's about the survey or whatever. But also that goes into after he was arrested. And if you recall, there was like some weird stuff going on Reddit afterward in the aftermath of the crimes. And I think that they weren't just trying to look for the survey, but I think they were trying to prove that he may have been allegedly in their minds, like online posting things and saying things in Reddit as well, because I don't really understand extending beyond or extending through his arrest date unless you thought that there was something post the attacks that you would then find too.
Yeah, that wouldn't make any
So
sense.
again, thinking back on those correspondence and if he did commit these attacks, like they say he did. So if he did, then maybe they were thinking like, well, he would probably go back in and talk to people about it or something like that. But, all allegedly because we don't know that he is the guy or that he's the only guy. But
Right.
I'm dying to know
definitely,
what's going on with this because with the Reddit, if he did find someone through Reddit, it would be really easy, I feel, for them to figure out who it was because if someone's messaging him, unless he went out of his way to make a separate account to talk to this person, there would be some kind of, metadata that indicates that the two accounts interacted separately aside from that one post. So that's
mhm.
interesting to see what comes of that.
And I think that's why it became super important at the time that they mentioned Bethany and the exculpatory evidence is because they were trying to get at exactly that. Well, we know that this person responded to the survey. They didn't just respond, there was continued interaction. I think that they'll get into that and say that that's how they developed a relationship to do the deed.
That's
Mhm.
fascinating. That's really fast. I have not read that anywhere else, and I've tried to do a lot of reading about this case. That's really fascinating that you have come up with that, and it kind of has a ring of truth. I mean, like we had said before, I think it was in our previous episode, that survey wouldn't have been required for his master's thesis or for completion of his studies if indeed it didn't go out until June. By then, his work would have been done. So why was he doing this? I mean, do you just like one day get out of bed and say, "Gee, I think I'll do a survey on it, Reddit"? I guess some people do because they have nothing
Me?
better to do. But I mean,
And then
Not
in this case,
allowed,
and
but
then the story that it looks like they're gonna try the prosecution is gonna try to put forth is that he went to Washington and then hosted the survey or hosted the survey just before going to Washington. So when you put those two things that close in alignment, then I guess it kind of tells you some of their story. And maybe right now it's best for us, for them anyway, for us to think that the survey pertained to his master's thesis and not really realize that it actually came like the day he moved to Washington. You know what I mean? If that's the
yeah,
case, then right now it's beneficial to them that we think something else.
true. There's a theory out there. I don't know how related it is. There's a theory out there. I was watching a YouTube podcast with Dr. Gary Brucato, and he was doing a whole a whole dissertation on Mr. Kohberger's personality and his background and all that kind of thing. And he postulated, and he admitted that he was speculating, but he postulated that it was possible that Mr. Kohberger had identified the victims, not a co-defendant, but the victims before he even moved out there, that he had, talked to them online and then he moved out there, which I got a lot of really negative comments for saying this, but I'll say it again. That's the only thing that really explains why a guy from Pennsylvania would go out to a second-rate university to study this stuff out in Washington when I grew up in Pennsylvania. The schools that we always looked to as being the great schools were in New York, New Jersey, Princeton, Boston, Washington D.C. There's Georgetown. There's all kinds of great universities and all the. So why now? I don't know. I really don't know. But it's out there that that's one of the reasons why he went way out to Washington. I really don't know, and I got some
So
really
I
nasty
actually
comments
think
for that.
I think I heard the same.
Yeah,
I think I watched the same YouTuber's channel,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I heard the same. And he also was saying, like I do wonder if he had even visited the home by Google and stuff like that,
Right.
in
Yeah.
advance to be able to know the streets and stuff like that. Um, if all of what I think they're trying to say is true, then that is probably what the prosecution's going to put forth at trial. It just makes the most sense to say that he went out there in June, hosted the Reddit survey, and found um, an accomplice or found his inner self, um, and then went and enacted these crimes on someone that he had already chosen. Um, but I will say, it does also look like, from the documents, it looks like Mr. Brucato could be wrong. Um, because a lot of the cyber stuff that they're looking for, like social media and stuff like that, it exists between like the beginning of June or mid June, and it stops at August 1st before the students were even attacked, months
That's really
before.
fascinating.
Um, so So I'm not 100% sure that he did have his eye on them quite yet because of when he started looking into them, according to the search warrant, though. If he had been looking into them before that, it would make sense to extend the search warrant back beyond June. And a lot of those social media search warrants, they actually start in June and they end
Right.
in August. Um,
Interesting.
which
That's
is
really
which is
interesting.
the same time frame that we're looking, at, like, his Strava, his running app, and stuff like that, and to be honest with you, there's no name on the running app, so I don't know that that's actually Brian's, but I did find a Strava account for Brian Kohberger. It only
Really? And
had one
what did that show you?
it only had one, run, so what it does is it tracks runs. It only had one. It was a very short distance, like, maybe less than a mile. It was entirely on Washington State University campus. He did not leave the campus, and I think it was like one way out. I don't even think he went. He tracked himself going both ways. But as far as I could tell, he didn't leave the campus, and about zero point 0.7 miles or so down the road, his run was over. But that was all I could find at that time. Other people have actually fished that out as well. I think the person who pointed that out to me was Jennifer Coffendoffer. Um, and at that point, I think a lot of people were talking about it, but then we have this Strava warrant, and that was the only thing that was in Brian's account. So I'm not sure how that would tie into this case, which also makes me think that maybe there was someone else using Strava. And I'm wondering if maybe it wasn't for running, just maybe just general GPSing, as a way of not
Yeah.
being on like Google Maps or Apple Maps, but still knowing your way around.
Right. Okay. The next point I want to make, I think when you first did this list, am I right? There were only 17 and then you added this 18th. Am I right?
Yes. So this
And
is
the,
fun because I actually didn't know to tell you guys before. So this will be the first time anyone's hearing it. But all of the May
ooh,
31st documents are actually nunc pro tunc. So they were all submitted on May 31st, but they were submitted for the 28th. So it's his AT&T that actually does have two telephone numbers on there. There's an AT&T. There is the Reddit, a Google account, the Strava app, Snapchat, of the kids that lived in the house, all of the six that were there that night. And there's one other one, but all of those 531 documents were actually submitted nunc pro tunc, not
and
just
again,
the Reddit.
why would they file these documents on May 31st and backdate them a whole month earlier on April 28th?
To the day after Bethany agreed to speak
Yeah.
to the defense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think all of those documents that were submitted on May 31st pertain to why they didn't want Bethany to have to speak to the defense and why they decided to get a grand jury and indict him. And the only thing that was really going on there was like arguments, like in the month of April, was like arguments about discovery, arguments about Bethany, and it was like discovery request 1 and 2 at the time. We weren't arguing the IGG yet. We were just arguing like police protocol and how things were collected at the crime scene and stuff like that. We were arguing Bethany, and we had done some searching for Instagram for the 3 girls that were attacked in the home. And I just wanted to tell you guys that just a few days before indicting him, that information from Instagram had actually come back. So when mainstream media says that maybe there was some Instagram attempts to communicate going on, that may be true because 4 days before they indicted Brian, they had gotten back some Instagram information, and also 3 days before that, so on May 9th and 12th, and then they indicted him on the 16th. So I do believe that all of those documents that would have been there before the 16th, including the nunc pro tunc documents, they do tell you why he was indicted.
It was somewhat intriguing that everyone was looking towards a probable cause, or I'm sorry, a preliminary hearing in the end of June. Everybody was looking towards that. That's why they were, having the scuffle that they were having with Bethany Funk, and they were talking about that. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, really, because very few people, if anyone outside of the inner circle, knew that there was going to be an indictment. So they indict him on May 16th. And then another intriguing thing that's never made any sense to me is why Attorney Logston and the defense team made such an issue out of trying to dismiss the indictment, because, even a law school student, a Crim 101, Criminal Procedure 101, constitutional law knows that the standard at a indictment is probable cause. That's just what the standard is. It's pretty much black letter law. I did an episode where I cited the Idaho law, which the judge had pointed out to Attorney Logston that he enjoyed the discourse that they were having while they had their initial argument to dismiss the indictment. And we had a guy that used to come on, Doug Cope. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, sadly. But he said, Andy, isn't a motion to dismiss the indictment pretty much just a rote kind of an automatic thing that defense attorneys do? And I said, yeah. And we moved on. But why are they so adamant about this? Why are they really pressing it? Why do they really want it? Tells me that there's something unusual about that indictment. So I don't understand why they really want to fight to bring the indictment to the Idaho Supreme Court. It looks like they're not going to be successful doing it, but there's something fishy about the indictment in this case, in my view.
I think so too. I think so too. I
Yeah.
also think that for the defense, it was kind of like arguing the protocol, arguing, the officers' experience and their training, stuff like that. Bethany Funk, all at the beginning. But I don't know if we're hearing much of that anymore. So I'm starting to
No.
feel like maybe that lost traction, and that's where we started picking up and harping on the DNA, the IGG, and the indictment itself. And it's insane to think about because I actually have found a document from Ann Taylor, post indictment, in which she states that the standard for an indictment is probable cause. And then
Yeah.
lo and behold, stands next to her, Jay Logsden, and he argues that that's not what it is or should be. So it's very interesting to hear them arguing entirely different points while being on the same side and asking the judge to even dismiss the indictment based upon that.
Well, the other intriguing thing about the most recent hearing, which I think was about 2 weeks before we're recording this particular episode, was that when they had the final argument on the motion to dismiss the indictment, the only ground that Attorney Logston argued was the standard of proof, that it was, in his mind, he thought it should be beyond all reasonable doubt, which is ridiculous, by the way, and not probable cause. Those were the only grounds that he argued in open court that day. But remember, that was only a small amount of what happened in court that day. There had been a previous hearing that started at 11 o'clock in the morning. The one I just talked about started at 1. And I was wondering if some kind of an agreement was struck where he was only going to be allowed to argue those grounds. Because if I'm sure you remember that initially the grounds that the defense was raising on dismissing the indictment included a bunch of things: failure to use exculpatory information, a biased grand jury. One of the arguments was that they didn't have a quorum in the grand jury, and there were other improprieties that the defense was originally arguing when they argued their motion to dismiss the indictment. But when it came time to the open hearing that, we peons in the public are allowed, looking down their throne upon us, that was the only ground that he was allowed to argue. So there's something fishy about that indictment, and I think that that's why they were pushing it so much. Again, we don't know. We're speculating, but It makes little or no sense to me. So somehow we've gotten to number 8. You had 18 reasons, and I'm impressed that you came up with so many. I really am. So thank
I
you.
actually made this list because I was going back and forth asking myself, like, am I insane for thinking
No,
that there
no, no,
might be
no.
someone else, or is there, is this just standard? A lone person really did, because I'm not one who's ever really questioned um, the amount of time. I suppose depending on how angry and ferocious you can attack a number of people pretty quickly. So that's not something that I've always kind of been questioning. It was more or less for me, is this a lone actor and I'm just making it seem like there's an accomplice? And then I was like, no, let's go back and start highlighting some of the places where I'm not saying that there could possibly be an accomplice, but where they've actually not said that it was one person for sure. And that was
Yeah.
really what I was looking for, was
Well, I've just
indicators
never.
that maybe there was more than one guy.
No, you've been very articulate. I've much more articulate than I've been in the past. What I've said in the past is I just don't believe it on its face that one person could do all this. Yes, I know all about BTK, and he eliminated an entire family of 4. I know all about that. And yes, I know all about Ted Bundy's gruesome hit on the the sorority, in Florida. I know all about those things. This is a unique thing. This is a case where it's been said, and I know it's hearsay, comment down below, but it's been said that there have been 54 stab wounds on Kaylee Gonsalves. Now, one person doesn't, eliminate 4 people, one of them with 54 stab wounds, and do it in a very short period of time that, I don't know, I've seen other people say that it's really between parking the car, doing the 3-point turn and speeding around, it might have only been 12 minutes. So I've just never bought it. I've never, ever, ever bought it. I can't wrap my head around that one person did all of this, especially in a home that some people say he'd never been in before. And I don't buy that either. But in
And then
any
I
event,
think
so
about the fact that there's 2 different floors. There was a number of
three.
Yeah, yeah, but the attacks on 2 different floors,
Right,
the 6
right.
people in the home, um, the confidence that no one else was calling 911. It's very, I don't know, it's very strange for one person to build up that much confidence and go in and take,
No,
even if it was just 12 minutes. 12 minutes is a really long time with other people inside the house who could be calling 911. So it
right.
just seems weird. It seems almost like there was someone there who made sure that 911 didn't get called. Like,
No,
there's backup somewhere, or, someone outside making sure that they don't see the lights coming, or just something, because
yeah.
I don't understand really feeling that confident, not just in a different person's home, but like I said, with so many people in the house and you don't know what's going on all the way downstairs on the first floor. She could have called the cops 5 minutes ago, and they could be coming in the front door right now. How do you know? So I think it's really weird that they felt confident enough to know that they weren't going to get caught that night, that they were
And
going to get out of there.
especially where 2 of the young women are said to have fought back. Xana Kernodle's parents said that she was a fighter. She was a scrappy girl, and she would have fought back. And now, with the most recent revelations, that Mr. Gonsalves had said that Kaylee was found sitting up in the bed, which tells us that she was fighting back. So just one more indication that if at least two were fighting back, I mean, no, there's no way. There's no way that it happened in 12 minutes. There's no way that it happened the way we're being told it happened. The thing about how there was no connection, that he'd never been in there, that's rubbish, because it was a drug
I
house.
agree.
Oh, excuse me. It was a party house. I misspoke. I said it was a drug house.
He
I
knew
did it
that
again. I'm
place.
sorry. It was he'd probably been in there, because the police had been there 3 times in the couple of months before it happened. And one of the times it was said, and I don't know if I believe this either, a lot of people don't, it was said that none of the actual tenants were there at that party. So people came and went. How do we know that whoever did the crime, and I don't know who did it, I haven't seen enough evidence to point the finger at any one individual, but I strongly believe that whoever did this would have had to have been in the house. And if you have a drug house, a party house, if you have a party house and people are in and out of the house, you don't know who's in there. I mean, it's just, I remember my college days, and I was never big into that crap at all. But I do remember having parties that were so big that people would be in your house and, is that my roommate's friend? No, that's your friend. No, that whose friend is that? I mean, that
Right.
happens, and that's
And then
quite
I have some
likely.
questions because a lot of people are like, well, maybe he was going over there to rob drugs or buy drugs. And that's one way to look at that. But I do kind of like to flip the coin, and sometimes it's a dice or a die. And, I kind of like to roll it then. So imagine that maybe he had relapsed and he had gone back over to buy drugs. But what if he hadn't? And this is a drug house, and maybe he didn't appreciate that, it being an open drug house supplying, he's lost friends that we've heard of to drugs, um, one of whom I believe it was said that allegedly Brian had given them the drugs and then they passed away. So if that is true, then maybe Brian chose this house and these students because they were selling drugs or a drug house or whatever it is, and it was something that he didn't admire and he wasn't partaking in anymore, and he was shunning. Um, Maybe he was trying to stop that. Maybe this was vindication. I'm just saying that there's
Well,
a number of ways to look at him having been a past drug user, and then the house maybe being a drug house. He didn't have to be there looking for drugs that night. He could have been there trying to get rid of a drug house that was on campus.
right. Well, I have my own theories about that, and we've kind of worked around those. Maybe we'll do another episode on that. I'm not prepared to go into my theory about the case. All I know is that there are a lot of cracks, there are a lot of holes, and I think that you've hit on some really significant ones here. And I want to thank you. I don't know. We have a feature that we do on this show where we sometimes read comments, and I don't know, Forensic, did you want to try and read a comment that you've gotten in the past?
So I have
Uh-oh.
a comment from one of my viewers. Her name is Nevada, and she she actually said to me, it was on my one latent shoe print video. We were talking about reasons why there may only be one shoe print. And she sent me a video from Fox, and the reporter Clarence was out there in the early days, and he was talking about the story that he had heard originally going out there. And originally, he had actually heard that Xana had in fact been attacked in the kitchen, that she did in fact see the person coming into the home and announce that was her speaking. It was her who said there is someone here. And then because the person was seen entering the home, they had to attack Xana and Ethan first. Now, I do know that that goes against what we've gotten from the probable cause affidavit, but she did just want me to see that. So this is what my commenter said after I watched the video. She said, I think it could be true that Xana was in the kitchen and tried to take off to her room when she saw that someone was coming. I believe that after, he may have gone upstairs and then came back down and gotten his bag, like the bag to change his stuff. And then
Mhm.
she says, I believe that at that point there was an attempt to clean himself up as well as some things in the residence. And then I asked her, I told her I like your logic and your thinking, so I just want to continue off of that. And I asked her, so say you had gone down the stairs and you got your bag and you had just changed and you're on your way out the house now and you're all cleaned up. You're headed to your car. And then you run into Dylan Mortensen. Is that why she's alive? Is because this person had already cleaned themselves up and didn't have time to risk needing to clean up again?
Fascinating.
Mhm.
Fascinating. That's,
And
who
so my
knows?
commenter responded with,
Yeah.
I think I would have left her alive at that point. And I have to agree, I think I would too. So,
Yeah. Two things about that. One is that BTK, who Kohberger apparently studied through his professor, Dr. Ramsland, BTK would take a kill bag into his jobs. He would take, the tools and devices and ropes or whatever he needed. He would take with a kill bag.
mhm,
So that's one of the things that people have said, that maybe Brian, took a change of clothing, took this, took that, took whatever he needed, and he'd already done, as you just said, what he needed to do, and he changed. And now he sees somebody else. He doesn't want to get any more DNA on himself, so he scoots. That's the first
right
thing that
out of
came to
there.
mind. Yeah. The second thing that came to mind is Some people say it's just a tabloid allegation, but Bethany Funk is said to have said to someone else in a tabloid that she saw a naked man. Now, if you had just committed these horrible atrocities and you wanted to not have any DNA on you, maybe you would strip down to nothing and leave. Of course, that doesn't account for where he left all the stuff. So I don't. Those are just two thoughts that came to mind as you were reading your comment. Lainey, do you have a comment?
So my comment is kind of funny. It's not one that you're going to necessarily think of a lot of response to, but in one of our past videos we made, is Brian guilty? Was it somebody else? Like our little points. Somebody, Moonvale, commented, Andrew, as others have pointed out, you say innocent till proven guilty, but in this video you came across as Brian is guilty, and the way you actually spoke was a little off-putting. I usually like your videos, but not this one. No. Sorry, just expressing how this video came across. And it's interesting because a lot of our comments are going to be like, oh, like, we love your videos, Brian's innocent. This had to have been someone else. And in our video that we made, we weren't even saying one way or another. We were just giving like 3 options for people to pick from. So I didn't know if you had any input from that, because I thought it was interesting how people thought that we were feeling so strongly one way or another, when at the end of the day, the YouTube channel is just about presenting all options.
Well, I'll take that and up you one. We had a comment on our immediately previous episode. Andrew, I always liked your channel before, but on this one, you were obnoxious. They said that I was obnoxious and arrogant. That was the word. They said I was arrogant because I just assumed that he was guilty. Well, what I did, I watched the whole thing. Everybody comment. Give us all the comments you want, but watch the whole thing, because I actually presented 3 alternatives. I said, you pick which one is right, A, B, or C. And the first one was he's guilty because of this. And we read down the whole psychological profile. The third one was he's not guilty at all, and he was just a convenient scapegoat because of the factors that he didn't fit in and all that kind of rubbish. But so we gave options, and I wasn't saying that he was guilty because of this. I was saying pick one of the 3 options, but I guess because I give people choices, I guess I'm an arrogant person.
We're going to have to like pick the order of the choices in the future to pander to our audience.
Either
that or I have to stop being so arrogant. I don't know.
I get a lot of that too. And to be honest with you, I just feel like I came into this specific case a little late. So people don't really know. But at the beginning of this thing, I was like, when they were like, so Brian Kohberger, I was like, who is that? Like, why would they say he did this? He didn't do this. Who is that? So in fairness, I've actually been all over the board. It wasn't until I actually started putting things together that I thought made some sense, that I actually have decided that as of right now, I think that the prosecution's story does make the defendant look guilty. I don't know if I think he is guilty. I would love to hear from Ann Taylor reasons why he might not be. I would love to hear anything that says that he's not, like a weird creep, but everything that they've put forward, they've made him a weird creep. And I say DNA or no DNA, people will probably convict him based upon that. So I'm just hoping that sooner or later we can get some information on why Brian is not maybe guilty, if that is even available, rather than just hearing that there probably is some and we just don't know yet. Kind of hoping that we can start to get there so that I can make a decision, because I really don't know. That's why I talk from the light of both angles, being the defense and the prosecution, and I just try to think through what she's going to say, what they're going to say, because I really don't know what I think, and until everyone tells me everything that they know, I won't insist that he is innocent, but I also won't say that he definitely did it. I will talk about an accomplice in the light that I do realize that the accomplice could just be the guy, and I always say that maybe there is no accomplice and it's just another guy. So I try to be fair, and I don't think people really understand where we're coming from all the time. So they're like, well, you're kind of pro Brian Kohberger, or you're just anti Brian Kohberger. And in reality, no, I'm just trying my best to think about what the defense is preparing for versus what the prosecution has already compiled together and that helps you understand what Brian's story could be. So think about it as a defense attorney. If you know the way the prosecution is thinking, if forensic frenzy just so happens to hit the nail on the head, use that, because that will help you defend your client. That
Right.
helps
You
you
said it
come
perfectly. Yeah.
that helps you build
Right.
a story. So a lot of people think that I'm against Brian Kohberger, and in reality, I would be 100% fine with Ann Taylor using just about anything that I have ever said to absolutely prove that there was another person involved and her client did not do this. I have no bearings on that. And I am only here to try and read out the documents and help other people maybe understand all the different ways that they can be looked at. Because if you do, then you can start putting pieces together and tell yourself what you think happened there and be a little bit more prepared for the scary story that I think they're going to tell you at trial. So,
I think that's very well said. One thing that I really was impressed when you first started doing your YouTube channels was a lot of the legal YouTubers. What they'll do is they'll take a document and they'll put it up in the screen and they'll read through it. Blah 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 blah. Lainey Law was seen, doing. She was seen driving her car down the street without her headlights on. Oh, and what that means is,
PTSD.
and that's kind of an inside joke, but they'll just read a document and maybe make a few comments and fill time and get their YouTube AdSense, whatever, going down a legal document. What distinguished you from those people is you'll take a bunch of different documents, and here are some of the documents you had in your last episode. I had to take them all and read them all. I had to take them all and index them and read them all before I really understood what was behind. But that's what makes you different from the others, is that you actually have a very analytical, forensic mind, and you pull a little bit
Thank
from this
you.
document and a little bit from that document and a little bit from that document and say, aha, I can connect the dots. And I admire that. My position, since you stated your position, my position, as it always has been, is that I'm an attorney and I respect the constitutional right to a presumption of innocence. And Lainey, how many times have I said that? Have I said that a zillion times on every episode?
Every single episode, we got our banners,
And
we
so
got everything.
I don't know how people, comment all you want. We love engagement, but I don't see how people say, well, you think he's guilty or you think he's not guilty, because I really don't know. I've read a lot of stuff. I've watched a lot of channels, not just YouTube, but other stuff. I've watched a lot. I've read a lot. I've done you haven't done your research. I've done my research. I just haven't gotten to the point where I can honestly say what has happened in this case. And we'll find out at the trial. I have said that I'm extremely frustrated that there's been more secrecy in this case than ever before. And I think we can imply something from the fact that there's been all that secrecy. So, my mind is open. That's why I like your channel, Forensic, is because you've kind of presented some stuff that I've glossed over before, and I had to go back and go, oh, wait, there's more to this. So that's where I stand. So don't accuse me of thinking that he's guilty, and don't accuse me of thinking that he's innocent. I've had people all over the spectrum. I've had people say that I'm a Kohberger lover.
Both sides are mad at us.
So that's it. I don't want to beat a dead. Oh, we've also been accused of beating a dead horse.
Yep.
So anyhow, Forensic, thank you so much for being with us. You spend so much time, doing your research and doing your own channel. I feel really lucky that you were ready, willing, and able to help us here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. I'm super honored in return to be here. So anytime.
Okay, Lainey, any closing thoughts?
I just want to say everything you said. Phenomenal, wonderful, well-spoken. I'll say it a million times over. Love your channel. Love just hearing your insight.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure
Thank
having
you.
you on today. Thank you.
Good luck
Thank
with
you,
all the
guys.
next ones. We look forward. You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions. And that's that.
No tunnels.
Tunnels.
And no phone calls.
There are tunnels.
No tunnels, no calls.